Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders World Forum 2021. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and coming up now is our Solutions and Strategies Roundtable, where we'll be discussing the impact of technology choices for the cloud-native telco. Now, cloud-native doesn't refer to specific technologies and is much about working methodologies and cultures. However, the evolution to cloud-native does have an impact on technology and does play a significant part in shaping transformation strategies. And it's this impact we want to discuss today. We have a full roster of guests joining us for this roundtable. So let me introduce Andrea Calvi, VP Technology Innovation at TIM. Nathan Rader, who is VP Cloudified Production for Deutsche Telekom. Diego Lopez, Senior Technology Expert at Telefonica. Chetan Narang, who is Senior Specialist Strategy and Innovation with Colt. Stephen Spilici, who is VP Product Marketing and Solutions, Telco and Edge Cloud with VMware. And Lee Hines, Technology Strategist, Communications and Media Solutions at HPE. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Thank you so much for taking part in the DSP Leaders World Forum. Now, we've put together some discussion points based on input from our TelecomTV viewers. So here's the first point, and that is that telcos are just too big and slow to take bets on unproven or cutting-edge technology. They're just unable to make rapid course corrections, so they'll always go with older, more stable technology, and that prevents them from gaining a competitive edge. Well, bit of a controversial statement from our viewers, so let's ask our telcos first, and let me ask this slightly differently. Andrea, let me start with you. Are telcos naturally going to prefer proven, older and more stable technologies over the latest cutting-edge cloud-native approaches simply because they're a known quantity and are safer?
No, I don't think so. Of course, when you speak with a tier one telco, you speak with a normally large company with a complex organization, and normally a company that had a story of success in a time where the technology was, let's say, much more stable. The life cycle of technology was slower, and so on and so on. But on the other side, you have to remember that, especially in Europe, telcos have been sustaining a lot of competition, a lot of pressure. This means that now we started thinking about, let's say, the sustainability of the business. We started thinking seriously about the evolution of the business. And for me, this means that now we're, let's say, very much pay a lot of attention to the new technology trends, to the impacts on the business. So we are definitely ready for a shift into the way of making technology innovation and business innovation.
Thank you, Andrea. Diego, it's a provocative statement, but are telcos really ready to embrace newer technologies, or will they always naturally be inclined to go and play the safe bet?
Well, I would say telcos are as ready as on any other big consolidated industry to accept or to incorporate cloud-native technologies. If you think about it, other well-established industries, and you can think about factories, manufacturing, you can think about the financial sector, you can think about insurance of the public service itself. They are not being that much agile. In the spite of what you hear, I mean, cloud adoption or cloud-native adoption is happening mainly in environments in which they are more or less in a green field or a almost green field environment, in which you don't have a install base of a certain size. You don't the level of the service agreements you had to attain is not so stringent. So I would say telcos are being as agile as an industry that has been around for more than 100 years, and that is dealing with critical infrastructure could be. For sure, I'm not going to say that telcos are perfect and that our management makes any big mistake, no mistakes. but for sure, it's something that is, if you think about it, is a natural evolution of the industry foundations, and will eventually happen, but it has to happen in a natural way according to the pace of the industry.
Thank you, Diego. And Nathan, perhaps we are being a bit harsh on telcos. You know, as Diego says, are telcos any different from any other vertical sector there in their adoption of these new technologies?
I think they are a little different, actually. Not because telcos want to be different, but because of the workloads that we run on top of our cloud or cloud native infrastructure. Just due to the history of them, it doesn't allow us to move as fast as we would probably like to. So, for instance, most of the workloads are defined according to some specifications, 3GPP specifications, and others that have been written quite a long time ago when cloud native didn't exist. And some of the principles that were written into those documents are fundamentally against modern cloud native principles. And it takes time to change those standards. It takes time to re-architect applications. And so telcos, not that we don't want to, it's we are at the mercy of the various workloads that we have to run to maintain a telco network that leave us in that position.
Thank you. And let me ask Chatin as well. From your perspective at Colt, are you happy with the rate of adoption of new cloud native orientated technologies, or is there still a need to go with the established technologies and be safer?
I think from a Colt's perspective, I think we have been quite agile enough to embrace new technologies and new standards. We were the first one to come up with Colt On Demand proposition, which is an SDN-based product proposition with digital user experience at its core. We have been working with MEF in terms of carrier SDN federation, and we were the first ones to launch a product with AT&T in that space. I think apart from that, I think we also worked with Versa, I think, to launch our SD-WAN solution. We were first to the market, and in fact, Versa was a kind of a startup at that time. And I think from our perspective, we have been driving innovation, and I think innovation has been and is an integral part of Colt's DNA.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you the four of you for that view. But let's go over the fence and take the view from the vendor community. Lee, let me start with you. Do you see the demand from telcos to be serious in their adoption of cloud native orientated technologies?
Yeah, certainly. I think that you have to remember that the formation of release 15 within 3GPP and then ultimately the release 16 that we're undertaking today actually began with quite simply a white paper that was formulated by the Next Generation Mobile Network Alliance, a consortium developed essentially entirely of telecommunications service providers. These are the visionaries that are actually driving the industry, driving 3GPP towards these open type of technologies in order to be able to fashion the type of objectives that we all have in play for 5G networks moving forward. Right, so it is a bit unfair to declare telcos as moving slowly. They're large. They have a lot of responsibilities. They operate under regulatory environments. But that said, as we move towards some of the principles and practices that we find within the 5G realm, the telcos have actually taken a greater charge of the industry. They've placed themselves in very predominant positions on 3GPP boards. They've established the NGMN that has come out with significant white papers that the vendor community is adopting, embracing, and acting upon in order to achieve more of a cloud native converged type of operation that will benefit a lot of the individual subscriber bases, the enterprise subscriber bases, and ultimately the telecommunication service providers themselves.
Thank you, Lee. And Stephen, what are you seeing? Are you seeing telcos ready to embrace these new technologies and actually actively doing so at a rate that you think is right?
Yeah, and I would say that when I think about whether or not they're slow and hesitant to change, I would say they aren't. I'd say that they're pragmatic in their approach. They have a lot at stake. They host critical infrastructure for our economies. This is, means the highest levels of availability and stability that are required for that. So there are lots of risks involved, and I wouldn't say they're risk adverse. They're more aware of the risks. And as it relates to the adoption of new technologies, coming from our perspective, host as a platform of virtualized and containerized network functions, we're seeing increased adoption, of course, of VNFs, but also of CNFs. So there is an increase in utilization of containerized-based technologies, and I would say, some of maybe the newer CSPs in the market, maybe those that are more fortunate to have greenfield deployments, are taking greater risks. But I also see quite a bit of traction across the board globally with our customers.
Thank you. But we still have management to contend with, no matter what the technology choice is. We do have management structures, big management structures in place in telcos. Nathan, might we still get some kind of pushback due to management needing to take longer to make these decisions, or even legacy operations teams, because they've got their own needs as well?
Yeah, I think that we do. Again, not that we want to, but there is a lot of testing that needs to take place. We still want to ensure that our networks are fit for purpose and as said, host critical infrastructure. So we want to ensure that those networks can maintain the uptime, can continue to perform to their peak while still running on these latest and greatest technologies. So we do need to do our due diligence on all technologies and ensure that we make sure that they are fit for purpose for going into our network.
Great. And Andrea, the vast majority of telcos do have substantial legacy operations going on. So I guess we do have to balance the needs of them as well.
Well, yes, of course, the operational issues need to be taken into account. Every telco has a lot of responsibility in running the business with continuity. On the other side, I think it is well understood that there is a transformation in the business and in the technology towards what I call the telco cloud, and as let's say the innovation department, like the department I work for, had already this consciousness years ago. Now this is going through all the departments. So I think now is the time where we try to have a good operational answer to the maintenance of the network, try not to create an unnecessary problem to operational team, but at the same time, within the company, we all share the fact that we are undergoing a change and we're moving towards a technology shift in order to get to better, let's say, sustainability and profitability of the business.
Okay, well, look, I think we should move on to some of the other concerns that our viewers are expressing. There's one here that really resonates with me, and that is, after what we've been covering cloud native for 3 years now, this next viewer concern, I still think is very important, and that is the need to agree on a common language is perhaps one of the most important steps needed as we evolve telecoms towards cloud native, because often it does seem that what cloud native is to one person is not necessarily the same to another. Is it a case of a lack of agreed definitions, or are we just interpreting as we want to interpret? Diego, you have been following this for far longer than we have. What's your view?
Well, I think that this is something that when it comes to a technology that is evolving, that has not been yet consolidated by years of use, etc., is natural. I mean, at the end, you think about cloud native, and very often I've been complaining, and I remember writing recently and people asking me whether I could be more specific, because most of the cloud native definition that you can find are purely circular. The cloud native is whatever is native to the cloud. Basically, I mean, for sure, they put it in nicer words, but basically is that what I'm saying, and it's true. There is a not total common understanding of this. But on the other hand, I believe that probably going for a too much, I don't know how to say, contained or rigid definition of what cloud native or other aspects in networking are, is something that it would be going business as usual in the networking space. We are very much used to standardize everything, to only acquire, deploy, and use things that are completely standardized. And in this sense, probably operators and vendors as well should take a little bit bolder move in the direction of, well, it's not going to be the same for everyone. It's not going to be the same every time. Let's give it a try. Let's fail. Let's learn from the experience, because right now with cloud environments or cloud-like environments, precisely one of the things that we have is the possibility of failing without having catastrophic failures. And this is important as well, and we should not forget about that.
Yeah, absolutely right. It certainly is. Stephen, what's your view on whether or not we need a common language, or is it sufficient at the moment, or do we need to put our heads together and sort this out first?
Well, there's a number of aspects of this process, right? In the standards sort of development, operators and vendors get together and they start talking about the technology components, and those have their own sort of naming and branding standards. And if some of them eventually evolve into concepts and others into even products and branding of products, as far as, the common definition of what is cloud native versus what is a container versus what is microservices, the benefits, they're all benefits there for each one of those technology areas. I think we need to be a little more faithful with our operators. They're going to evolve, if you will, their use and adoption of these technologies. There's no harm in starting in one area of that technology spectrum and then growing over time and increasing adoption and maybe even increasing in complexity as they learn more about the environment. But, you think about it, there was a big rush, 5 years ago to get to OpenStack. That was, a kind of a complex but exciting time. That moved forward many years later, got standardized, people became comfortable with it. And so as those kind of technology areas mature, they'll explore other parts of the territory within the technology standard. But vendors and operators should work together collaboratively to define those areas of commonality and galvanize those for the marketplace, because it will help really set the direction for others in the market, both vendors and operators competing in different parts of the world.
Thank you. And Lee, do we need to focus on establishing a common language, or do we really just say, well, we can provide you with whatever you need, Mr. Telco?
Yeah, sure. So the question of commonality has been around since the advent of advanced intelligent networking in the late 1980s. It moved through concepts such as TNC in the early 90s, OSA Parlay and Parlay X in the late 90s and the early 2000s. But again, the advent of the services-based architecture that was established as a catalyst for the formation of the 5G environment opens up new possibilities in concert with the establishment of control and user plane separation that was even established in releases preceding 3GPP release 15. It sets the foundation for establishing commonality. But that said, what you need to really focus on is the use cases that you're going after as an operator, as an enterprise, as a vendor, to be able to establish the type of solutions that you want to take into the marketplace. You let the use case drive the definition of commonality instead of the other way around.
Chetan, what do you think of that? Let the use case drive the definition of commonality.
Yeah, I think certainly. I think the use case I think is provides a common page of getting the thinking through out there. Just to give an example out there, I think at MEF we were working on a carrier on a carrier SDN Federation API framework, and we were one of the key contributors out there. And I think we went out and came with the first implementation with AT&T out there. And now we have other service providers joining into building the federation capabilities in that way. So having the standardization in place with the use case, which was about carrier SDN federation in place, we see the innovation happening in the industry, and I think that standardization and that common language has really built the foundation to deliver these capabilities.
Thank you. And Andrea, is the need of establishing a common language, is that an important factor, or are you less concerned with what we call things and what?
No, I think we need a common language and a common, let's say, playground. It is true that during recent years that we've seen a lot of initiative, a lot of projects, simply because there have been a lot of interest from the industry, from the vendors on this cloud revolution and cloud transformation. But I think now it's time to start sort of converging and trying to, let's say, build this common language. I think this can be achieved through common projects. I think telcos, vendors, government, hyperscalers, we need to start working on projects, and so defining what you call this language, so option pruning, simplification of the possible alternatives, and so on. I think it's a process that is already happening, honestly.
Okay, thank you. Well, moving on, our next concern from our viewers, and that is that the telecoms industry is just too fixated on Kubernetes and containers as a panacea to all their technology challenges. Although really, I guess this could apply to any sector. I'd like to know if you think there's a danger of seeing containers as some kind of magic remedy for all our problems. Nathan, perhaps I could ask you that one first.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of folks out there who think that containers magically equals cloud native. And I think there is a danger of assuming that Kubernetes is going to solve anything. Fundamentally, OpenStack and VMs weren't the challenge from the past. The challenge has always been, how we architect and design the workload so it does become quote unquote cloud native. When we get down that path, containers are part of it, but without properly re-architecting the workloads to run and use the kind of capabilities that those containers provide, it's not going to change anything. And until we look at how we do things, how we operate the network, how we handle the lifecycle management, and how we architect the applications that go into those containers, it's not going to be a magic bullet that solves anything, without a whole lot of other work to go into making the container ecosystem appropriate.
Lee, are we putting the cart before the horse here in that we should sort out what our needs are and our workloads are before we just reach for the container option?
Well, look, you can take a model of the early days of web development, elements like Netscape and the early advent of Internet Explorer, Prodigy, even components like that, and see that it all began with a bit of a Wild West type of approach towards achieving a common goal of creating an internet for us all to take use of, right? And nobody at that time said, hey, HTML, that's our panacea. That is our golden ticket to uniformity between any of these entities. Instead, as the internet slogged through the overall development of Commonality to make things like this very conference happen, it moved along the way in turning value add into the focal point of how the technology made itself available to support that value add. And you can see that in the industry today. Even elements like Kubernetes even formed themselves in early establishment of standards definitions for components in the 5G network, such as the services communication proxy, which interacts at a Kubernetes level with individual services that are being deployed. So again, as I said before, the use case is what's driving the value add, and that is what's driving the technology, and you'll find harmonization as a result of that. And back to the original question of the slowness, which I disagree with, of an operator, it's actually the operator that has performed this declaration to the industry.
Chetan, what do you think of the perception in our industry of containers and Kubernetes? Because it so often seems that it could be the answer to everything without actually thinking through where and how best to implement and deploy.
Yeah, I think when we talk about cloud native, I think Kubernetes and containers straight away come in our mind out there. I think no doubt, I think they are kind of foundational building blocks in a cloud native approach from a technology perspective. But we need to be mindful. I think Kubernetes as a technology is coming more from an enterprise applications, enterprise use cases. And if we try to apply this to the telecom, I think what we have witnessed and in our implementation, what we have seen, I think this is mainly a part of the OSS, BSS transformation of containerizing the apps, the management layer, the orchestration layer, and extending into the digital portals, as part of the microservices architecture out there. Now, in terms of the network functions, I think certainly there has been some development in terms of, the mobile 5G core getting containerized. But if we talk about conventional network functions such as routers, gateways, and firewalls, I think we have not seen much traction from the vendors in the industry in that space. So I think certainly there's an area of work in containerization from a network function perspective.
Yeah, good point. Stephen, you've already mentioned CNFs. We're already looking to move past virtualization and into the containerization. All depends what the C stands for in CNF, I guess. But that's network functions. That's not all of the telecoms industry. So do you feel that perhaps there's too much importance or hope being placed on containers?
I think we're kind of at a point where we were with the introduction of NFV, and it's very similar in the sense that operators are very excited about it, and in reality, they were talking about deploying their data intensive workloads on the data plane, and in reality, they started off sort of slowly on the charging functions, which were less critical from that perspective. And I think this is an evolutionary thing that's going to happen. You're going to dip your toe in the water with Kubernetes and container-based technologies, and you might containerize certain aspects, of the infrastructure, as Chetan said. So you might start off small and then grow from there. It's important for us to remember the evolution, which we've all come from, and also not to be overwhelmed by the hype of, a new technology. I think you have to also fit it into the right use cases. We're seeing a lot of interest in private networking or private wireless implementations and leveraging containerized-based technologies to effectively right-size the compute storage requirements at the edge. And I think that might be an area where operators are going to really start to take advantage of these advanced technologies, validate them, and then start to more broadly deploy them. I'd say one thing we're doing, which is very important to our ecosystem and our survivability and market, is to extensively test and certify all of these VNFs and CNFs and make sure that they are carrier grade and bulletproof. And I'll also say that we've come from the evolution of NFV to now CNI and the combination of both in our telco platform. And as we've done that, we've learned a lot of things. We've also helped a lot of vendors as they try to onboard their functions in containers. we found areas of where they can make vast improvements in how they create their, if you will, their offer and market, and how they may tweak their offer to be better and more appropriate for the use in containers.
Andrea, there's obviously a big role for containers and Kubernetes within the telecoms network and the telecoms environment. Do you feel that we have the balance right, or are we, as has been mentioned, are we putting too much emphasis on containers?
Well, my opinion on this is Kubernetes is a great technology. It's a great piece of technology, and I think it's also, let's say, a good piece of technology from a strategic point of view, being an open source. But I'm also convinced this is just a brick, maybe an important brick, a fundamental brick, maybe a cornerstone, but it's a brick. We need to understand that what we are trying to do here as Telco is what I call the Telco cloud. So the transition from selling communication and connectivity services to a platform business. And in order to, let's say, build this platform, the containers, again, is just a brick. There are a lot of tools, there are a lot of, let's say, other functions that needs to be built around this in order to achieve a whole platform that can help the transformation of your business. So we don't. It's wrong to think about Kubernetes as the magic bullet solving all problems. No, it's just a percentage of the solution, and we need to build a lot around it. And no one has the, let's say, the final answer. This is something we are learning all together. Telcos, service providers, vendors, day by day. It's really the beginning of a new era.
Diego, part of a bigger tool set then, because we've heard recently about Kubernetes and how it could form an ecosystem even. It's just attracting all these developers into it. Is it a tool set, and albeit a very important tool for telcos?
It is very important, but we should not forget one thing, that when we started talking about NFV as well and SDN, etc., we were talking about programmable networks, for example, with SDN, but it was not that you can write the network as it was the same kind of program that you use, for example, to manipulate a database. It's not the same that you build an infrastructure that is like those in cloud data centers, but it's not the same infrastructure. With Kubernetes and in general with containers, I think it's the same situation. Is that it's something that is useful, but it's useful as a starting point. We had to learn, and we had to learn in two directions. First is how we have to evolve the concepts that are very useful around Kubernetes to make them suitable for all kinds of network workloads. And on the other hand, as well, we had to start, and this is something we had to start thinking about how network functions, network architectures, the different elements in the network can be thought in terms of these new possibilities. Because something that still is happening is that while we have tools or we have the elements to build networks in a different way, the way we keep thinking, building architectures, defining interactions is like we have still, if we were confined, still we're confined into the good old boxes. And this is something that we have to learn, as I said. We have to transform the tools, and we have to transform as well the way in which we design what we want to build with the tools.
Well, thank you, Diego, and indeed, thank you, all of you. We have to draw our discussion to a close now, but you can be sure that we'll be covering this topic in a lot more detail later this year in our Cloud Native Telco Summit. Now, if you're watching this on day 3 of our DSP Leaders World Forum, then don't forget to send us any questions you have, and we'll try and answer them in our live after-show program, and that's later today. Otherwise, please take a look at all the sessions from this year's World Forum. We're making them all available for on-demand viewing throughout the week. Today's focus is on cultural transformation, but we're covering 4 other important topics as part of this year's event. And we've got a great lineup of speakers this year, so please keep watching and do get in touch with us because we really want to hear your views. For now though, thank you for watching and goodbye.